After a long and eventful offseason, the Boston Bruins remain stuck between retooling and competing, and this season will tell us a lot about whether the Bruins can bounce back.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoke to Be. Today is Friday, August 22nd. Thank you so much for making Locked On Boston Bruins your first listen every day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. On today's episode, I am going to answer a bunch of lingering questions that remain after what has been a fairly eventful offseason for the Boston Bruins. New coach, high-profile draft pick, some new players. Is this team any better than they were last season, and can they bounce back? So we're going to talk about the overall team outlook, offense, defense, goaltending, roster construction, long-term strategy here as kind of a bit of a summer wrap-up. And a quick programming note, I'm heading up north here in Ontario next week for some last week of the summer camping, last hurrah before school starts. So likely won't be any new episodes next week, but we'll be back full-time beginning in September with less than a month now until the first Boston Bruins preseason game, which is pretty crazy to think about. Before we get into all that, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. And you can find me, my hockey thoughts and dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren. I'm a lifelong Boston Bruins fan, and I've been covering this team for various outlets for 20 years. So let's jump into the mailbag, shall we? The Bruins are at a bit of a crossroads after finishing at the bottom of the Eastern Conference. And after a disappointing 2024-25, first question is, what is a realistic expectation for the Bruins heading into the new season? Is this another retool year, or can they truly contend for a playoff spot? The Eastern Conference is pretty deep. In the Atlantic Division in particular, you had 5 teams from the Atlantic that made the playoffs last season. And when you're looking at cracking one of those playoff spots, you have to ask which one of those teams is dropping out. In the Metro, you had the Washington Capitals, who finished first, the Carolina Hurricanes, and also, who was the third team over there? The New Jersey Devils are going to be much better. The Atlantic, you think those 5 teams, are any of them going to drop out of playoff contention? The Florida Panthers, obviously not. The Toronto Maple Leafs could take a step back after losing Mitch Marner, but I don't think it's calamitous enough to take them out of the playoff picture altogether. You have the Tampa Bay Lightning, always strong, actually finished ahead of Florida in the regular season standings last year. The Ottawa Senators finished only 1 point back of the Panthers. And then, of course, you had the Montreal Canadiens with a bit of a surprise playoff spot. And they're only likely going to get better and better as their youth movement gets more experience. They added Noah Dobson. Again, in the Metro, I don't think Washington is going to fall all the way out, although they did have a pretty good luck season last year. The Hurricanes, Devils, still very strong. And you'll have teams like the Rangers, Islanders, maybe even the Blue Jackets looking to make a next step. So all that to say, the Eastern Conference is very deep. The Bruins are no longer among the elite teams, but they could fight for a wild card spot if a lot of things go well. So there's reason for optimism, but there's also some reality checks that we have to put in place to kind of curb that enthusiasm, if you will. The team added several veteran players this offseason. Viktor Arvidsson, Tanner Jeannot, Sean Kuraly, Mikey Eyssimont. Question is this a step forward or a move that will hinder the development of younger players? There was a lot of question marks about Don Sweeney's movement at free agency on July 1st. And this was after, you could argue, they misspent or overspent on Elias Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov last summer. I believe those two will be better. I think Arvidsson has an opportunity to deliver immediate offense on the second line, likely with Pavel Zacha and Casey Middlestat. But otherwise, the Jeannot signing has been widely panned as one of the worst this summer, if not over the last several off seasons. Eyssimont brings some upside. Kuraly, bottom six depth, but you're kind of potentially blocking some kids from jumping into the lineup. Does this hinder the growth of a Fraser Minten, a Marat Husnudinov, a Matt Poitras, even a Fabian Lysell? That's kind of the balancing act that it seems as though Don Sweeney over and over puts his coaching staff in that position. Do they go with the vets who are perhaps more reliable and steady, but with very limited ceilings? Or do they rely on some of the younger guys who have higher floors than some of these guys and could indeed pop in the right situation? Now, head coach Marco Sturm is known for working with younger players. The question is, how much of an impact do we think he can have in his first year, especially with a roster that is in transition? He's got a fantastic reputation for development, for structure, for energy. It's going to be a real balancing act for him in his first year to try to be as competitive as possible while also helping some of these kids develop, finding the right spots for them, and figuring out what to do with some of these veterans. The Bruins are kind of aiming to stabilize this season, not necessarily dominate. The playoffs are possible if everything breaks right and if they find the right pieces for the lineup. You could try to shove the vets into those bottom six spots and have a lineup that is built around Kuraly, Eyssimont, Kastelik, or you could give Jeannot, you could give some of the younger guys an opportunity, like a Fraser Minten, like a Matej Blumel, like Matt Poitras, Fabian Lysell. So that's going to be a real decision-making process. Waiver exemption is going to factor into that as well. Everydayers will know I've talked about that quite a bit. The guys who are eligible to be sent down on waivers or sent down to Providence without going through waivers, I should say, include Poitras, Minten, Lysell. So those are the easiest guys to reassign and keep the veterans up to begin the season at the very least. That's going to be a huge factor to keep in mind here as we go into training camp and as they make decisions for the opening night roster. It's not necessarily what the roster will look like in a month or two or to end the season, but waiver exemption will certainly be a factor. Now, up front, leadership and scoring depth are the biggest questions, and we'll dig into the offense and roster construction a little bit more here as the podcast continues. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to the ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day. Suddenly you realize you just have to be at Fenway. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, even invite a bigger group to come with you. Game Time makes it all possible. It's fast and simple. I bought tickets for a game coming up in a couple weeks between the Blue Jays and the Astros. Prices on the app were so clear, no hidden fees, and we got a great view from our seats, so we know exactly what to expect when we arrive. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNHL to get $20 off. Download the Game Time app. Last minute tickets at the lowest price, guaranteed. Thank you once again for making Locked On Boston Bruins your first listen every day. I appreciate you everydayers so much. You've subscribed, you've downloaded, you've recommended, and I would ask again for some fresh reviews if you're able to pop those up on Apple Podcasts or give a star rating on Spotify. It all really helps to get the message out there that we are your only daily Boston Bruins podcast. And I'm so excited to dig into this upcoming season, even if the expectations are not what they once were. And with the departures of veterans like Brad Marchand, Charlie Coyle up front, question came in, who do I see stepping up as a key leader and offensive contributor this season? David Pastrnak, and I talked about this the other day in terms of scoring, a whole episode devoted to it. Pastrnak, superstar, puts this team on his shoulders, but he needs help. Morgan Geekie has been re-signed to hopefully continue his upward swing. 33 goals last season, albeit on a bit of an elevated shooting percentage. Hopefully he can increase his shot volume in order to offset what probably will be a bit of a drop there. Elias Lindholm was on that line to end last season. He did not look out of place, and he also had a strong world championship, trying to earn a spot on Sweden's Olympic team. So you know he's going to come out, and I do believe, I've said this many times, Lindholm, Zadorov will be more comfortable now that they are more established in Boston and more core players. They're not kind of like adding to a group that has been there for years and super tight. They are kind of being ingratiated more into the core of this team, for better or worse, I guess, but that should bring out more in them. Casey Middlestat is a guy that I'm also hoping to see step up as a leader and offensive contributor this season. He's got the pedigree. He's got the potential. He's shown that he can put up decent numbers back with the Colorado Avalanche. 50-plus point seasons, pushing for 60 a couple years. And he's going to need to step up as well to anchor that second line. Pasternak's production was outstanding last season, leading the league in 5-on-5 scoring. But the team still struggled to score. And the question came in, what needs to happen for the Bruins to generate more consistent offense across all four lines? Well, they do, like I mentioned, need to get that second line consistency. Middlestat has potential breakout ability as the second line center. Hopefully Pastrnak and Geekie can keep their chemistry going with Lindholm anchoring that line. Allow those two guys to come up on the wings. North-south game for Lindholm. He goes straight to the net, acts as a decoy. Pasta can either shoot it, pass it over to Geekie, get it back to the point. A lot of options there. When it comes to the bottom six, again, can you rely on Kuraly, Esimon, Jeannot to help boost the offense? Probably not. And that's where you might want to instead have a guy like Fraser Minten, Matt Poitras, Fabian Lysell, maybe Georgi Merkulov. Hopefully Husnudinov can break out a little bit. You're going to have to find, or Blumel, Steves. Those were guys who led the AHL in goal scoring last year. This is going to be a defense-first team, I believe, but you need someone to score, and you're going to have to sprinkle some of those offensive threats into the bottom six in order to increase the offense. And of course, one thing that desperately needs to improve is the power play. It was so bad last season, and if they can increase the efficiency of the power play, that will help boost the offense. The Bruins have a bit of a logjam at center suddenly with Lindholm, Mittelstadt, Zacha, Geekie can play center, several prospects. Is there a trade coming? And if so, who's the most likely candidate to be moved? We've heard rumors of Pavel Zacha with interest from the Vancouver Canucks. Mittelstadt perhaps being out there, although I've argued both of those guys, you should maybe hang on until closer to the trade deadline to maximize return. Those probably are the most likely candidates to be moved unless they decide to go with, like we talked about yesterday, Fabian Lysell, Michael DiPietro, but up front, it's Zacha and Mittelstadt. Which of the young prospects, Poitras, Minten, Husnudinov, most likely to secure a full-time roster spot at a training camp? I really think that Fraser Minten, if you count him as one of the Bruins prospects, I think only James Higgins is ahead of him. I really like his work ethic. I really like the intangibles that he brings to the table. And don't forget, he cracked the Maple Leafs lineup out of training camp a couple years ago. In 2023-24, he played only 4 games before being sent back to the WHL, but still was able to make enough of an impression to crack that roster out of training camp. He didn't put up huge numbers for the Marlies last season, 7 points in 11 games for the Providence Bruins. He had 1 goal in 6 games for Boston, but second round pick in 2022. He's only 21 years old, and I really believe this guy could make a huge impression in training camp and make it undeniable to send him back, similar to what Poitras did a couple years ago. And he perhaps is more NHL ready. He's got more NHL experience. Husnudinov has the speed, the two-way appeal. I mean, I would love for all 3 of these guys to be on the roster, to be honest. But you're going to have to find that balance between experience, youth, speed, defensive responsibility, offensive firepower, and also leadership. You can't just throw a ton of rookies on the team and expect them to find their way. You need that leaders and a more balanced offense. I really think, again, Lindholm's going to be a leader. That would be Elias. Mittelstadt needs to step up as a veteran kind of in this younger group. Sean Kuraly has the experience of playing in Boston, but really at the end of the day, while the Bruins do need to find some offense and not allow Pasta to be on an island once again, as much as there was only a 10-goal difference between Pastrnak and Geekie, but like a 50-point difference overall. 1-2. You need some guys to fill in those gaps between the elite and tertiary scoring. But at the end of the day, defense and goaltending are going to make or break this team. And of course, the long-term plan hinges on James Higgins. Will they be in a position to draft a similar profile player, or can the defense and the goaltending make them more competitive? We'll discuss that here as the podcast continues. August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're eyeing your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. Take a flyer on the MVP race if you think Josh Allen's going to repeat or someone else is going to step up. Crown your division champ in August, or make a pick for the Super Bowl, I'm personally going with the Buffalo Bills this year. Visit the FanDuel app today. Start planning your future bets now because Futures Day is one day and one day only at FanDuel. Play your game. All right, let's wrap up this summer wrap-up mailbag episode. Defense, goaltending are going to define the Bruins' short-term ceiling, while the prospects pool is setting the long-term foundation. There's no question that the Bruins' defense struggled with injuries last season, particularly to Hampus, Lindholm, Charlie McAvoy. How confident are you that a healthy defensive core can make a significant difference? You take Hampus, Lindholm, Charlie McAvoy, or the equivalent on any team, your top two defensemen, off any roster, and there's obviously going to be a huge dip in production, in wins. If healthy, McAvoy, Lindholm give the Bruins two legit top two defensemen. Whether they play together or anchor the top two pairings, which is probably more likely, that's a huge swing factor that you cannot overlook. And I do believe a healthy defensive core can make a significant difference. You're not relying on Mason Lohrei to take on top pair minutes. You're not asking Nikita Zadorov to do more than he should either. You've got guys appropriately placed in the top six. Maybe you start Lohrei with McAvoy, Lindholm with, let's say, somebody like Henry Jokiharju or Andrew Peeke. Zadorov and Jokiharju actually had some pretty good chemistry. So I would go, honestly, to spread things out, Lohrei, McAvoy, Lindholm, Peeke, Zadorov, Jokiharju. That's a decent top six. You add in Jordan Harris, Viktor Soderstrom as some candidates to step in. That's not a bad defensive core, and certainly better than what you were working with this past season. Brandon Carlo's gone, stepping up to fill a top four defensive role. The candidates are Jokiharju, Peeke, Jordan Harris. Mason Lohrei needs to evolve a bit defensively, but likely Jokiharju will fill that top four role alongside Nikita Zadorov. Or, you have the ability to mix and match here and be able to roll out some pretty good pairings that should help solidify the defense for the Bruins. Jeremy Swayman, clear number one goalie. Can he handle a heavier workload and bounce back from a down year? He's probably going to hit 55 to 60 starts. He's got Olympic motivation. And as I read this morning on Dauber Hockey, one of the big reasons why he struggled last season was because of his PK save percentage. So with a healthy defense and some guys who can jump in on the PK, if that improves, and it's incumbent on Swayman to make those saves as the last line of defense, but that should improve his overall numbers as well. So yes, I do believe in a bounce back year. I'm banking on it on my salary cap keeper league, pairing him with Peter Kochetkov for a pretty sweet pairing. That's only going to cost me around $10 million. So I'm looking forward to seeing him bounce back. And that Olympic motivation will only keep him on top of his game because he wants to be in Italy like many of those who are in consideration. Backup goalie spot between Joonas Korpisalo, Michael DiPietro. Who do I think wins the job? And what does that mean for the team's goaltending tandem? I talked about this at length the other day on the podcast. My hope, or my suggestion at the very least, is that they bury Korpisalo in Providence, save a bit of money, give DiPietro the backup spot, and that gives you the ability to keep one of the younger forwards up with that cap space and with that roster spot. Now, if DiPietro falters in training camp or Korpisalo is, unbeatable, then you can still have him reliably up there, but you risk losing DiPietro on waivers if you try to assign him to Providence, and the likelihood is he will be snagged up. All right, let's look at some prospect stuff to end today. The Bruins drafted James Higgins with the 7th overall pick. What kind of impact do you expect from him in the long term? Any chance he makes the team right away? Well, we already know that he's going back to BC this season. Another fellow Bruins prospect will be the captain, Andre Gasso, which is nice because it allows Higgins to just focus on doing what he does best, which is scoring. Long-term, high-end star upside, and we could see him in black and gold as early as the spring if he decides to leave Boston College at the end of their season. Now, the Bruins prospect pool has been a major point of discussion. Which of the team's prospects are you excited? Am I excited to see develop this season, and why? I mean, obviously, Higgins, going to be watching him. Minten, Lennar. I was actually looking at, the Bruins prospect pool has long been ranked very, very low. And Daily Faceoff had updated rankings here just today. And they had the Boston Bruins at 21st. This time last year, they were 31st. Key prospects include James Higgins, Fraser Minten, Fabian Lysell, and the author, Steve Ellis, I believe, writes, Boston's pipeline is far from deep, especially for a team that's going to need to retool sooner than later. They're kind of doing that. But drafting Higgins, 7th overall, trading for Fraser Minten and Will Zellers gives this team a huge jolt. They have a ton of depth down the middle, but adding Higgins to the fray makes them even more dynamic. They've got a bit of everything from speed to skill to size. So you got to like that, a 10-spot jump. I'm very excited to keep track of Zeller's progress this year, as well as the guys on Providence who may not make the team right away. Looking beyond this season, what is the Bruins' long-term plan? Are they prioritizing a Stanley Cup in the next few years, or are they focused on building a new foundation for the future? Well, the reality is you have David Pastrnak, who's 29 years old. Charlie McAvoy is 27. Jeremy Swayman, 26. That's your core. So if you're looking at 4 to 5 years to get back to contention, you're looking at all these guys being in their 30s, not unheard of, but Pastrnak, like you could argue, he's well in his prime right now. And if you want to get the most out of him, you want to not have an extended retool period. The goal is always the playoffs, Stanley Cup. But at the same time, they are also focused on building a new foundation for the future. So it's kind of a bridge, right? They're trying to stabilize with some veterans, build around some kids, and maybe keep an eye on 2-3 years from now when James Higgins really makes an impact. Minten, Poitras are full-time guys. Pasternak's still doing his thing. McAvoy's rock solid on the blue line. Jeremy Swayman's back to being a Vezina contender. And perhaps some of, I don't want to say dead weight, but some of the weight is taken off the roster. And, Casey Middlestat will come off the books in a couple of years, as will Kuraly, Zaka, Esimont, some of these guys that they have signed. Your long-term guys are Pastrnak, Lindholm, who's already 30, Geeky, Jeannot, for whatever reason, McAvoy, Lindholm, Zadorov. Those are the only guys who are signed for past the next 3 seasons, and Swayman. So that's who you're going to be going forward with. If they can get some of those kids to step up and build around them as the cap continues to go up, we could see them back in contention in a few years. But again, you're banking on Don Sweeney, who was given a contract extension to make the right calls. And I do think last year's signings will look a bit better this upcoming season, but the signings he made this July 1st, not super encouraging, to say the least. All right, that is today's episode, my friends. Thank you so much for joining me. The Bruins kind of stuck in the middle right now. They can compete if they're healthy and kids push, but the future really hinges on prospect development. Hagen's being a hit as a 1A center star, and some of these other younger guys stepping up and spending the money a little bit more wisely. As I said, I'll probably be off next week, but please do subscribe, follow, especially on YouTube. Hit that notification button so that you get every new episode right on your phone with a notification. Please send any more questions you have via DM, YouTube comments, extra replies. Please do check out the Locked On NHL podcast next. All the latest league-wide stories from our local experts. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If anything breaks with the Bruins, I'll be sure to pop up a reel or a short or a TikTok to keep you up on it. If there's major talking points, I'll try to jump on and record a full episode from Northern Ontario. Well, semi-Northern Ontario. Thanks so much, friends. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you again here on the next episode of Locked On Boston Bruins.